Welcome to Canning Class. I'm Pauly Guglielmo. Thank you for being here. You guys excited to do some canning? Yes? Okay. All right. I'm very excited because I'm going to start off with a confession. I have done about 1,000 cooking classes in my life. Eggplant parm, chicken parm, whatever, pasta, make pasta from scratch, sauce from scratch. I've literally never done a canning class. Never. This is my maiden voyage. But can I tell you this? I'm actually more qualified to do this than I am a cooking class because I'm not a chef. I don't know what I'm talking about. And when I do cooking classes, they actually pair me with a chef in case anybody has questions that would require a real chef because I don't know what I'm talking about. Here, again, I don't have every answer, but here I know a little bit more about what I'm talking about. I am technically a professional canner. I hold a few degrees in canning. I have a thermal processing. Degrees kind of strong. If I'm being honest with you, I have a thermal processing certificate, which I got through the Food Venture Center at Cornell University. Or as I tell my mother, I have a degree from Cornell University. It was a 3-day class. I also have a HACCP training. HACCP is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. I told you this was going to get a little nerdy, but I am so excited for this. So Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points is just a sort of a way of looking at food manufacturing and canning, which is what we do. My company's called Craft Cannery. I actually technically own 2 businesses, Craft Cannery and Guglielmo Sauce. The sauce is just a pasta sauce brand. It's a line of pasta sauces. Craft Cannery is the manufacturer that creates that. But we also make many other sauces. We have confidentiality agreements in place, so I can't necessarily list them all because we are being filmed today, but a couple that I am allowed to list would be like Sticky Lips barbecue sauce. We make red osier, the au jus, the gravy. So I have experience with canning all kinds of stuff, from salsas to very high viscosity, very thick, like oniony, thick vegetable sauces, all the way to, of course, a million different pasta sauces. We make a ton of barbecue sauces, salad dressings, those kinds of things. So we can literally every single day. Today, just a couple hours ago, I came from canning barbecue sauce. So where you can talk about canning all kinds of things, obviously today, we're concentrating specifically on tomatoes. I will also be taking questions, and we can kind of take questions as we go. I think I'll repeat the question so that it can be heard on camera. But if you do have questions, give me the opportunity, just maybe raise your hand so I can call on you so that we'll find a good spot for it. Chances are I'm probably gonna cover what you're gonna ask about, but maybe not, and so don't be afraid to ask. So hazard analysis critical control points. I was starting to tell you about that. So this is something that you probably do. You kind of do it in life anyway, but it's just in food manufacturing, we have to do it a little bit more specific. It's exactly what it says it is. It's a hazard analysis, which is what could go wrong. That's it. You literally just kind of do a report on like what could go wrong here. And then critical control points would be zeroing in on what are the things that we really need to control to make sure nobody ever gets harmed by consuming this. And we're gonna get really deep into it, but for us today, there's gonna be 2 things that we need to control to be able to can these tomatoes safely. One is going to be the temperature. We wanna get hot, we wanna boil, okay? Now I think actually you can do a little less than a boil. Full disclosure, my sauce at our factory, we don't boil. We go to about 195 degrees, which is just under a boil. Boils around 205. But we hold it there for a little while longer. In this case, this stuff is gonna have been cooking for a very long time. So, and this right now, I know you can't see in here, but this is boiling. This is a tomato mixture that I started a few hours ago because this whole process does take several hours. So we're gonna do a little TV magic where I'm gonna show you what I did, then we're gonna fast forward in time a few hours. It was either that or keep you here till midnight. Do you wanna do the midnight thing? Do you want to? I'll just throw this away. We can stay till midnight, it'll be fine. We'll order pizza, it'll be great. And then the third degree I hold is actually something called safe quality food. It's there's this thing called the Global Food Safety Initiative, which is this umbrella that kind of covers a ton of food manufacturing. And one of the divisions underneath Global Food Safety Initiative is something called SQF, which is Safe Quality Food. And I am a SQF practitioner, and also my facility is an SQF recognized facility. And essentially what that means is it's a sort of a global standard, a global system that you follow that makes it so that certain businesses will do business with you. Try not to drop any names or anything, but I would say, you can bottle barbecue sauce, pasta sauce all day. sometimes bigger companies with more of a reputation, who have a lot more on the line, are going to require, they're going to want to see a little something more. And so that's where the SQF comes in, the Global Food Safety Initiative. That was very vigorous. That was a 22-hour audit. Get this, for my fellow canners, I had a 22-hour audit on my canning methods. 22, could you imagine somebody for 22 hours asking you every question there could be about canning? Really? My goodness. Okay, anyway, so I was starting to say, so I've done 1 million cooking classes with 0 qualifications, and I'm doing my first canning class, the only thing I'm actually qualified to do. It's kind of exciting, with my Cornell degree. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. So the one thing that's gonna be a little bit different here, in that this is not a cooking class, is the recipe. What is the actual recipe for canned tomatoes? Well, the recipe can be whatever you want it to be. What you're gonna see me do today is 4 things. There's only gonna be 4 things in this. There's gonna be tomatoes, there's gonna be basil, there's gonna be parsley, there's gonna be salt. We may use a little citric acid, we'll get to that in just a moment. That's it. It's not really a recipe here. And also like technique and whatnot, we're kind of just throw it all in the pot and let it boil down. That's very, very, very subjective. That's up to you. You don't even have to do the basil, parsley, salt thing. You don't have to do that. You can just do tomato if you want to. There's also going to be some controversy when we get into the canning of tomatoes of skins and seeds. Guess what? I keep them. I keep my skins and my seeds right in my canned tomatoes. Little controversial, I understand. Not everyone loves that. But if you've ever had our sauce, Guglielmo sauce, you've had skins and you've had seeds, because we use skins and seeds in everything. And if I'm being honest with you, I've been asked 1,000 times, why do you do that? It's because my grandpa was too darn cheap to throw anything away. My grandpa also would tell me, what kind of tomatoes do you use to can? You'll see these are plum tomatoes, plums. We can get into some controversy on tomatoes for a moment. I use plum tomatoes because they're meaty. They have less water. Now you boil down, it's a sin almost that you can't see this, but this is a pot of boiling tomatoes. It's I'm trying to pull this up. Do you see the liquid coming off the spoon there? A lot of water has come out of these tomatoes, okay? If you get these giant tomatoes, what do they call the big tomato? Beefsteak tomatoes? My grandfather, again, he used to, I won't say exactly what he said. I'll edit this a bit. But he would take a tomato, a Roma tomato. He would cut it in half. He would hold it up like this. And he would say, do you see that? And I would go, see what? He'd say, exactly. Then he would take a beefsteak tomato. And he would cut it in half. And what happens when you hold up a beefsteak tomato? Water comes out. He would say, Paul, this is the part I'll edit. See if you can figure out what word I'm editing. That's a bullcrap tomato right there. We use Roma tomatoes, little footballs. I even got it tattooed. So let's talk about tomatoes. Let's get controversial. Is everyone ready to get mad at me? You ever heard of San Marzano tomatoes? I don't use them. I don't use them. Let me explain. San Marzano tomatoes are awesome tomatoes. They're awesome. San Marzanos are great, but they have to actually be San Marzano tomatoes. And here's the problem. San Marzano tomatoes are kind of like champagne. Champagne has to come from the Champagne region of France, or else it's just sparkling wine. That's the same thing with San Marzano tomatoes. But for some reason, the regulation isn't quite there, like it isn't with champagne. And I think with champagne, even there's some regulation issues. I think people sneak the word champagne onto things that they're not supposed to sometimes, but that's none of my business. Same thing with San Marzano tomato. A true, honest to God San Marzano tomato is the best tomato. I'm not gonna dispute that. They're great. Have you ever had them? Do you know what I'm talking about? They are great. They are just naturally sweet. They have a flavor. It's like a full, bold tomato flavor. They're wonderful. Problem is they have to really be San Marzanos, which means they have to be grown in Italy, in the San Marzano region, in the ash of Mount Vesuvius with the certain, I don't know, environment, atmosphere at a certain altitude. I don't know what the heck it all is, right? The certain wind hits it from a certain way and the unicorns graze in the field next to it. I don't know. There's a bunch of magic basically that makes a San Marzano a San Marzano. You may have been to the farmer's market and seen people selling San Marzano tomatoes. I'm not here to blow up anyone's spot. Not technically a San Marzano tomato. It's still a plum. It's a plum. It's from the plum family. It's a cousin. It's a friend, you know, but it's not technically a San Marzano. So I just use, indigenous to this area, I use Roma tomatoes, what you're seeing right here. There are 2 things we have to do to make sure that we accomplish the one thing we're trying to accomplish when we can things, and that is shelf stability. We need this stuff to be safe. 2 ways we're gonna do that today. We're doing something here called thermal processing. Heat and pH. pH means acid, acidity. So temperature we got into already, right? We're gonna go to a boil, that's gonna give us plenty of buffer. I wanna boil my water, I wanna boil my tomatoes. And I wanna marry them while they're boiled, get a seal, get an inversion, which is optional, we'll talk about that. Put it off to the side, and then all my canners know the magical sound, right? What's the magical sound? Oh, how good does that feel when you, and you got 50 jars and then all of a sudden you just hear, it's the best. It's the best feeling. That's the seal for those of you who don't know. That's the vacuum. That's the actual, the button. Let me see here. That's the button being sucked down. You've achieved a vacuum. Now there is actually a measure to know if you have the correct amount of vacuum. The correct amount of vacuum is a measure called, it's HG. I told you I've never done a canning class. It's capital H, lowercase g, and it means something. It's Googleable. You can buy these meters, these things that you actually would take, pretend this was a full jar and this button was down. You stab into it and it will tell you the vacuum. And the vacuum should be at least 5 Hg. And typically it will correspond directly to, or correlate directly to how hot you actually jarred the liquid at. So something that's boiling like this should give you a vacuum of more like 20. You don't actually need one of these meters. The beautiful thing is if that button's down, you got a vacuum, right? You don't need to buy a meter. I have to because I own a plant and it's required. My inspectors ask for it, but I have to. Another thing is gonna be headspace. Headspace is gonna be how much empty jar is there. So, right, how much do we fill? They recommend, it's a little tough to get this exactly right. They recommend 6 to 8% of the total container. You're allowed to have up to 10% for commercial canning. You're allowed to have up to 10%. What you really want to avoid is you just don't want to fill all the way up here. Because if you fill all the way right up to the tippy top, you're not going to get a vacuum. You're also going to have a little bit more of a chance that some tomato or something gets onto this rim going around. And if it does, and you clamp down on there with your lid, and there's some tomato in there, what you're getting is you're getting oxygen to that tomato. First of all, you're stopping yourself from getting a great seal, so you're gonna get oxygen to your whole product, so that's where you can see product go bad. And second of all, someone's gonna open that, and that was not properly sealed, so even if you do get a good vacuum, you're gonna probably see mold right where that was. Probably, depending on how long it takes till you open it. But am I nerdy enough yet for you guys? Is this all the excitement you were hoping for? Again, I told you, take one of my cooking classes. By now we'd have chicken parm going. It would be, instead we're about to talk about acid. Okay. With temperature, the 2 biggest things are temperature and pH. You've heard me say that a bunch. The vacuum, the headspace, important, not quite as important as temperature and pH. pH is a huge deal. My entire world in commercial canning is all about pH. pH is huge. In fact, if I ever am gonna get in trouble with anybody, it's gonna be because a pH was off. So what is pH? pH is just the actual acid, the acidic level of whatever's in the product. And all different things have all different acidity. So we were talking about it a little bit before, but something like lemon juice or lime juice is going to, and just to make it fun, it's an inverse scale. So a lot of acid is a 2, not much acid is a 14, right? So like the lower the number, just to make it fun and confusing, right? So like lemon or lime juice is gonna be like a 2. Tomatoes typically run in the 4s somewhere, which is interesting because 4s is right around where those controversial numbers are. So I'm gonna give you 3 numbers, 4.2, 4.6, 4.8. 4.2 is what I, in the commercial canning world, almost always, with very few exceptions, have to achieve 4.2 or lower in all of our finished product. So if you ever wanna know how things are commercially canned, we will can, we will take a pH reading during canning. 24 hours will go by and we'll take another pH reading, and that pH reading is what's considered to be an equilibrium pH reading. Oh, I love being nerdy. This is so much fun. I just said equilibrium in real life to real people. This is so cool. Cornell. I don't know, did I mention that? Did that come out? Did I tell you guys about the Cornell degree I have? Okay. 3-day, it was a 3-day class. The 24 hours later, what the equilibrium means is that everything inside of that jar has now married and become one, and it's all happy, and now you have a representation of what that is going to be going forward. It's basically the environment of the inside of the jar. So we need to test that 24 hours later. No sooner than 24 hours later. You're gonna pH that, and 4.2 is your magic number in commercial canning. Now in real life, the real number is more like 4.6. 4.6 is truly where things can start to get kind of damaging. But just to protect you, the consumer, they put a buffer in for commercial canners so that if we ever do mess up, chances are we're gonna mess up a little, and we might put something out into the market that's like a 4.3, which is no bueno for us. We're in trouble for that. But if you ended up with it, you wouldn't even know the difference. It's not gonna hurt you, it's fine. So there's like a buffer packed in there. When we do these things, we go through what's called a process authority. This is a commercial canning thing, so forgive the tangent, but we have to basically apply for a license to make anything we make. It's something called a scheduled process. The scheduled process will say, it'll have the actual recipe of whatever you're making. It'll have some critical factors. Critical factors are pH, and the pH will say 4.2. Of course, at home, you don't have to do that. 4.6 is a good number to know. If you did want to buy a pH meter, it would be a great idea. I don't think you have to. It kind of depends on what you want to buy. They are not as expensive as they used to be. pH meters used to be thousands of dollars. Now, if you spent $2,000 on a pH meter, you would have the Porsche of pH meters. You can buy, we have, the brand we use at my factory is called Apera, A-P-E-R-A. We have two. We have a little stick one, which is all you would need for home, that costs about $80, 80. And then we have a nice one, a benchtop one, a little bit more heavy duty. It was about 400 bucks. That's it, right? 400 bucks, listen, it's a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's not 4,000 bucks or 40,000 bucks, right? It would not be a bad idea to buy a pH meter if you're concerned about food safety at home. Yeah.
So if you buy a pH meter and you use it, you have to wait 24 hours to test the food then?
You can test it while you're actually canning, and then you can also test it 24 hours later, and the 24-hour read is gonna be your real, now you're feeling good. Now you're like, that's official, 24 hours is the good read. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? So you test it while you're doing it just to know that you're not way off, because we should talk about, somebody had a very controversial question about canning pasta sauce. I mean, it was so controversial that I can't even believe it was brought up in this class. So the thing is, if we're just canning this is safe. You're gonna be fine. If we wanted to introduce some things, turn this into a sauce, let's say we wanted a canned sauce. Let's blend this up. Onion, garlic, oil, we're gonna do the whole deal. We're gonna make sauce. Now we're gonna can that. Well, we're introducing a bunch of things that are gonna hurt the pH of this product. We're gonna add in fresh produce is no good for acid. Now we do it, I mean, we put peppers and garlic and onion, but that's where something like this comes in to play, citric acid. What I'm going to do if I was gonna make sauce, my garlic, my onion, my peppers, all that's gonna go in here. That's gonna drive my pH up. I would do a pH test. I would probably not be at 4.2, probably be up around 4.6 or even 4.8, which we'll get to, which is like lethal, like bad. 4.8 is like, now you're gonna hurt people. So that's why it's not a bad idea to have a pH meter, because now you know, okay? But if I was making sauce and I was putting all those things in, especially if I was gonna make a vodka sauce a nightmare. You make vodka sauce, we make a bunch of cream sauces. Now you're putting milk, cheese, and you want that to be shelf stable. You have to do a lot to make that shelf stable. Now it's possible, you go to the grocery store, you see cheese sauce. I've got my own Rosa sauce out there, it's got cream cheese in it, it's shelf stable. So how do we do that? Acid, again, acid. But not necessarily citric acid. I know I'm a little all over the place, but citric acid would be great for going straight into tomatoes, because this is a little bit harsh. It's citric, so it's like, if I do that, like, you ever have Sour Patch Kids? You know the movies and have Sour Patch Kids? It's like all the Sour Patch Kids at once. There's a couple other things we use at our plant. There's a lactic acid, which does way better with dairy. So if I was gonna make vodka sauce and I want that to be shelf stable, I wouldn't want that, because I'd have to put so much of it in there, it would ruin the flavor. So you get lactic acid. Then the third one, the one I'm in love with. This is my, I would marry glucono-delta-lactone if I could. It's called GDL. Glucono-delta-lactone is a wonderful acidifier that carries with it very little taste. It's a little bit more expensive than the acids that we were talking about, but it's a really good acidifier if you wanted to do like milk and cream. So anyway, I would like, sir, to get controversial and say I can can pasta sauce at home. I can. I'll even go as far as say you could put a little meat in there if you wanted to. So we're actually a USDA cannery as well. So we do can things with meat. We can a ton of Rochester meat sauces and then pasta sauces with meat. And you can, but again, it's gonna be a pH control. So if you ever wanted to get into that, definitely buy a pH meter, definitely. Because now you are gonna be putting a little bit more risk into what you're doing. Okay, let's actually do this, right? So we're using Roma tomatoes. I am going to grab myself a pot, big stock pot. Nothing is in here at all. There is no oil, there is no water, there is nothing in this pot. Nothing at all. Anybody ever caramelize onions at home? You ever do anything like that? What's the secret to caramelizing onions is the smaller the pieces, the faster they're gonna caramelize. So same deal here. This is just a little paring knife, not ideal, but it's what I had at the time at the plant today. So I usually do this. Pieces about like that. And that usually gets me where I'm going in about 3-4 hours for canning my tomatoes. And if I really wanted to cut that, I could probably do a little less if I wanted to. I did forget to mention the stem. You want to get rid of the stem. So I usually just chop off the stem. And I'm gonna at least quarter my tomatoes, maybe do them in eighths. If you are the type of person who definitely wants the skin and the seeds out of there, I'll tell you a little bit about how to do that. If you took your tomato, I've not done this much, so, and just kind of scored it, just kind of did that to it, and then put it into some, I don't even think the water has to be boiling, I think it can just be pretty hot. If you put it into some hot water, it takes about a minute or so, you'll start to see it wrinkle up a bit. You can then pluck that back out of there with a strainer or something, and then the skin will peel off real nice for you. Pretty good. You still want to take off the stem. If you want to get rid of the seeds then at that point, you can actually core them. You can actually take this, so pretend this went into some water, it started to get a little wrinkly, I took it out, now the skin is gonna peel off pretty nice. Now I can cut that open and I can just simply core it. Now that's doing it by hand, but you can buy machines that'll actually crank and do this work for you. So it's not that bad. But anyway, so yeah, so I'm just gonna do my tomatoes, I'm gonna quarter, I'm gonna eighth my tomatoes. Let me give you a funny Grandpa Pete story. Speaking of sanitation and being safe about things. This is a story that I don't think I've ever actually told this story publicly. I don't think I did radio for 15 years. I don't even know if I've ever told this on the radio. Stop me if I did. My grandpa, so I started canning tomatoes with my grandfather years and years ago. And he's passed now, but he was around when we started the business, so that was very sweet that he got to see that. So my grandfather used to can tomatoes in his basement once a year. And that was really where I learned. And he used to have these giant pots, and he did it all by hand. And he did it with a little paring knife. And he was fast, right? He would take this thing. He was so fast that if I try and show you how to do it, I'll probably cut myself. But he was fast. He would take this thing and he would, and it would be in there, right? And every once in a while, he would catch himself. He would do that, right? He would catch himself. And then he would go, and then right back at it. And I would just look at, I would go home and I would tell my mom, I'd be like, Mom, I think Grandpa bled into the tomatoes. Like I think, and yeah, I'm like a teenager at the time. And this is her father-in-law. So you know how like you know how you get along with your in-laws, but also they're your in-laws, so you only kind of get along with your in-laws. Like, so my mother was like eager to, my mother would be like, you know, the things I've seen in that kitchen, I can't believe we're even alive. My mother would always say, she would always bring up Christmas Eve, and like Christmas Eve was Feast of the Seven Fishes for us. And so Christmas Eve was a lot of my grandfather cooking fish. And my mother never ate much, and I would just eat ever. I just thought it was all delicious. And like, you know, years later, my mother would tell me, she's like, I didn't trust it. I didn't trust it. I didn't think he was doing anything right. I thought that fish was undercooked. Hey, listen, I lived, I don't know. I lived, I grew to be, if anyone was unhealthy, it was my mother. I'll tell you the truth. I met my mother, I was 9 pounds. Look at me now. So So she's the one, honestly, if she's gonna do any talking. So anyway, we don't have to go through with really chopping a ton of these tomatoes because the truth is, I did a lot of the work earlier. I was on a seminar earlier today. And while I was on the seminar, I literally chopped an entire big basket of tomatoes. And that's what we have here. So I wanna see how, I don't quite know to what extent you can see it. Can anybody see it? Can you see in there at all? Maybe if you stand up, you'll be able to see. You don't have to if you don't want to. But the consistency, this is getting, the consistency on this is kind of important because I'm going to, at this point, add my other ingredients. So really what it looks like, well, you'll see when it goes into the jar. But basically what I have here, yeah, my induction cooker's mad at me now. The good thing about induction cookers is they're very safe, and you see that? It saw me do something with the pot, and it's like, bad, turning off. Induction cookers are safe. The reason I love induction cookers is when I first started doing sauce events, and I would go to festivals, I wanted to cook sauce for people. I wasn't allowed to have any flame because I wasn't a real food vendor. I wasn't a restaurant, so I had to have like a non-flame, and that's where I fell in love with induction cookers. And these things are great. They really are. All right. Let me see if I can, except for the fact that I broke it. Not really. Not really to the CountryMax folks in the back. I just have to figure out how to put it back. All right, anyway. So when it gets to this, so basically it's in a soupy consistency right now. It's a little watery. I will tell you this also, if I was at home, I may consider straining some of this water out of here. This is really just sort of your preference call. So where it's at right now, that consistency that you got to see, that's about what I'm looking for when I want to add my herbs. As far as why I add what I add, the short answer is, Grandpa told me to. The longer answer is, these are my personal favorite things in sauce. I love simple sauce. So we put out a whole line of sauces, right? And our main marinara sauce is tomato, oil, garlic, onion, green and red bell pepper, basil, parsley, oregano, a little sugar, salt, pepper. My second favorite sauce in the whole entire world is this. This with a handful of fresh basil, handful of fresh parsley, salt, and I would probably chop up some fresh garlic, and I would probably drizzle some olive oil and put that right on some pasta, and I would eat that. That's my second favorite sauce in the world. It's fresh, really fresh. Great sauce doesn't have to be an all-day thing. Believe me, great sauce is when you cook it all day. I'm not saying that's not great sauce. What I'm saying is this also, fresh tomatoes like that, big chunks, I love that on pasta. Love that on pasta. Anyone ever eat their sauce like that? A little bit? I love that. It's my second favorite thing. So I'm gonna take a bunch of fresh basil. This is hydroponic, but being that we're actually filming this in August, this is tomato basil season. It's all going on right now in Western New York. So if you can, get your hands on some fresh basil, some fresh tomatoes. Do this if you have a garden, even better. Right now I've been looking at my garden every night. It's about time to get through there and start picking some tomatoes. But so I'm gonna take really a ton of this stuff. I mean, I'm gonna be pretty liberal about how much basil I'm putting in there. And this stuff is just gonna give it an excellent, excellent amount of flavor. And the great thing about canning, for those of you guys who don't can, when you open this thing, you pop this thing open on Sunday morning and it's time to turn it into sauce, it smells like it did the day you canned it. You can't beat that. You really can't beat that. So a little bit more basil, and then I'll probably take parsley. I'm gonna get a little bit more violent with and just kind of rip at it. What did I tell you earlier about how we were gonna measure our salt? Wait till you see this. My grandpa used to say, "Give me your hand, Paul." I'd say, "Why you gotta use my hand, Grandpa?" He'd say, "Yours is bigger." How much salt? A heaping handful of salt. I look like I scared you. You okay? You all right? Is that a lot of salt? You got high blood pressure? I have high blood pressure too. Now I'm gonna mix-a-roo. Now I got the mix-a-roo going on. Yeah. Too much salt for you? Guess what? You don't have to put that much salt in. It's okay. If you don't want to put that much salt, you don't. Some people do think because like, I guess in the like old, and if you want to get into the history of canning, I'm not super well versed in it, but I do know, years ago, that's how they used to preserve things in salt, right? Like many, many years ago. So some people think salt works as the preservative. Not quite, not in this situation. Salt can affect pH a little bit, but if we're gonna control pH, it's gonna be here. Now, I brought citric acid because the truth is, you probably should have some. It's the right thing to do. Having citric acid and owning a pH meter is the right thing to do. It's like driving 65 in a 65. It's the right thing to do. If we're just gonna do this particular, if we wanna call it a recipe, if we're just doing this recipe, we know. Like, I know the pH of this is safe. I know I don't need citric acid. I know that I don't need citric acid, and I know that I probably don't need to pH it. Because I've been doing it for years and I know that. But if you want to be safe at home, get yourself a pH meter, have some citric acid just in case, because this is going to be, your pH meter is going to tell you exactly where you're at. Again, your magic number is going to be 4.6. 4.2 is going to give you a ton of safety. Citric acid is the thing that can magically get you there if you happen to not be there. If you did pH this, if you decided that day, I'm going to put a little garlic in there. Right? I'm gonna do some oil. The guy told me I could do oil. I went to CountryMax, the guy said I could put oil in there. I'm gonna put oil in there. I'm gonna put garlic in there. You do that and all of a sudden you get a pH reading that's high. This will fix everything for you. This will fix everything. Glucono delta lactone. That's really like a commercial grade acidifier though. But that's if you're gonna do something that's very low acid. Speaking of low acid, let's get nerdy. There's 3 types of canned foods. There's formulated acid, acidified, and low acid. We deal almost entirely with, this would be considered formulated acid. Formulated acid is when the formula itself is acidic enough that it's shelf stable, that it's a safe product. Acidified is when you have something that's gonna be more in that danger zone, in the high 4s when it comes to pH. Like a vodka sauce or something like that, where it can be safe if you add acid. That would be an acidified food. And then a low acid food would be like canned green beans or something like that. Would be something that's just very, very low in acid and requires a lot more. To be honest with you, this is out of my expert level, so that's gonna require more of like a retort, maybe even aseptic processing, cooking to 250 degrees, pressure canning, like a lot of stuff that's kind of over my head even, to be honest with you. And to be over my head, I don't know if I told you guys, but I have a degree from Cornell. So that's kind of, it's a paper certificate, 3-day class. Anyway, so we said we were gonna do 2 things to make this super safe. pH, we've talked about a lot. Any questions about pH? I know I've been talking about it a lot, but it is really important. Yep.
And, create a soup and put it in the freezer?
If you're gonna freeze it, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you're freezing, you have to
yeah. Yep, yeah. So anything that's frozen is gonna be in the safe zone as far as not growing bacteria. Okay. And then same thing with high temperatures, right? Like what we're doing, we're getting up into the safe zone. You could never leave something like that out. I mean, things spoil because there's a danger zone, which is above freezing and below boiling, where things grow bacteria and things become.
It's safe to make it, eat it that day and then freeze the rest.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Freezing kind of fixes everything for you, yeah. You can like for commercial, again, refrigerating and freezing things, it's just a lot harder commercially because there's just a lot less space available, yeah.
Does that 4.2 apply to anything you can besides tomatoes?
So actually, no. We do a lot of barbecue sauces. Barbecue sauce has a lot of vinegar in it. And typically barbecue sauces don't get cooked quite as hot. So a typical barbecue sauce, critical factors might say something like cooked to 180 degrees, which is not quite as hot as we're gonna go with pasta sauce, and a pH of 3.8 or something like that. And the reason they're giving you that 3.8 pH is because you're not cooking it quite as hot. If you volunteered to cook a little hotter, which we do with some barbecue sauces, where you say, hey, I'm gonna cook this to 195 or 205, then they'll let you go up to a 4.2 pH. And again, I think that I have a couple hundred things that we bottle and 70 or so clients, and there's a lot of confidentiality, but one I'm allowed to talk about because he's just given me kind of permission is Sticky Lips. So Sticky Lips, their main barbecue sauce is this all-American mild barbecue sauce. And one thing about that barbecue sauce that makes it great, it's why you love it, but also problematic if you're gonna can it, is onions and peppers, fresh onions and peppers. Now, on the one hand, does anyone in here ever make barbecue sauce? Make a little barbecue sauce? Not incredibly typical to see fresh produce in barbecue sauce, not the craziest thing in the world, but it's not that typical. It's something that sets them a little bit apart, right? Peppers and onions in their barbecue sauce. But what I was telling you about, if you start adding some of that stuff to here, you're gonna see a little bit more, you're gonna see the acidity start to struggle a little bit more. So with Sticky Lips, we actually do that. We actually have to cook it way hotter and keep it a pH of 4.2 because we need that 4.2 because we'll never hit 3.8 because of onions and peppers, things like that. Man, this is nerdy. I love it. Other questions about pH, acid, anything? Really? Okay. We can talk about acid all night, yeah.
So I know that if you're just canning, but if you did like if you pressure canned it, is that?
Yeah, that would help a lot too, yeah. Yeah, so, well, yeah, so there's this process you can do called retorting, which is, I think it's like 250 degrees. Like it's way hotter, it's more of what you're talking about. And that does let you skip some things where I'm talking about right here. Pressure canners for home are, the reason that I don't do much of it is because I own a business. And I'll tell you why, because pressure commercial canners are hundreds of thousands of dollars. A nice retort machine, there is one in this area, and it's owned by a company called Ledestri. And that's, they're a little bigger than my business. There's another one, there's like the next closest one I know of that is any type of real volume capacity is in Philadelphia. So they're hard to come by. They're very expensive pieces of machinery. A home pressure canner I don't think is that expensive. I don't own one. I don't even know, but you guys tell me. Maybe do you guys own pressure cookers at home? Anybody? No?
Normally like 100
Yeah.
bucks.
So,
If you buy a big one, new.
yeah, so 150 bucks or so. So it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's not like, it's not ruining, you're not going into debt. It's not hundreds of thousands like I would have to. So yes, that would let you skip some steps. It does exist. You can look into that, but it's not what we're doing. We're doing thermal processing, but yes. Any other questions about pH or acid or anything like that? Yes.
Let's say, for home canner, what I do for myself that before is just to use a tablespoon.
Yeah, lemon juice as an acidifier, totally. Yeah, when I pulled up that pH chart, I don't remember if it was on camera or not, but I had a kind of a chart of everything. The most acidic stuff that you can find is lemon and lime juice. So yes, when people don't want to, like in my world, in the commercial world, sometimes people don't want citric acid on their label. They just feel like a consumer is going to see that and say like, oh, what is that? So they'll add a little lemon juice. But the problem is lemon juice can ruin some recipes. In your world, and especially with you were saying you do jams and jellies and stuff, so lemon juice probably works, right? It works well. In pasta sauce, a drip or two of lemon juice isn't gonna make a difference, but if I was really starting to pour a ton of lemon juice into my sauce, it would probably ruin it. I don't know, I've never tried, but yeah, lemon juice as an acidifier totally works. Vinegar works for certain things as an acidifier. So like when we get our scheduled processes back, which is that thing I was telling you about, that sort of license on what exactly you can, what you're allowed to do, what the formula is and what the critical factors, pH and temperature are. But one of the things that will, sometimes it'll say is citric acid, or it'll say may add vinegar, may add lemon juice if you need to. The only thing is in my world, I then have to make sure that's represented on the label. So I can't just decide to put lemon juice in there one day because you might be allergic to lemon juice. So I would have to put that on my label. So I have to kind of think twice about that stuff. Because then someone sees lemon juice in pasta sauce and they go, what is this Guglielmo guy doing? This guy's crazy. All right, any other questions about pH or anything? Okay, the other side of it is temperature, which we talked about before, which is pretty straightforward. You're cooking to a certain temperature. In this world, what I'm showing you, you just want to go to a boil. If you got bubbles, you're good. This thing's boiling, you're A-okay. Any questions about temperature at all?
How long do you boil it? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter if you're boiling, no. We go to 195. I had mentioned this earlier. We go to 195 degrees, which is not quite a boil, and we do hold it there for 6 minutes. And that accomplishes, I think, what it's supposed to accomplish if you simply boiled. But I'm not looking for a boil because it's a big tank, it's a lot of sauce. Boiling it could eventually basically damage the quality, not the safety, but the quality side of the sauce. So, yeah. Anything else? I'm gonna show you a little bit about how to actually can. So what you wanna do is you wanna get your product to temperature. You wanna get that nice and hot. You wanna get that boiling. You wanna get a nice little pot of water next to it. Ideally something a little bit bigger than this. And you wanna get your mason jars. And these are great mason jars. And by the way, canning supplies are not easy to find. CountryMax actually has them in stock, which is awesome. Pandemic, canning supplies during the pandemic. I love you coughed during the part where I talk about the pandemic. That's amazing. That's great. That's perfect. It's like it's on cue. All right. But pandemic did a lot to canning supplies. Do you guys remember last year in 2020, canning supplies were like impossible to find. You couldn't find glass jars and closures. To tell you the truth, that's still kind of happening. So they're not just plentiful at this point. It's a little bit better this year than it was last year, but there's not a surplus by any means of canning supplies. So get them all you can. But what you're gonna wanna do is get yourself some nice jars, some nice lids. Now at home I do use just a cap and a ring, like a twisty. Here we have these nice ones from CountryMax that are actually the whole thing. You wanna get boiling water, boiling product. Boiling water, very important. Everything is boiling. We're sterilizing everything. It's very, very important. Once this has been in that boiling water for a while, and this is hot, and by the way, this is skill right here. You guys, I don't even know what I'm doing. This is pointless. I'm literally burning my fingers for no reason. That is just years and years of touching hot things. I remember I worked at Red Lobster when I was in college, and I remember that was when I first had to handle hot dishes. And that was where, from this point forward though, I got hot stuff. My grandfather had me beat. My grandfather would boil the water. And I brought tongs. I have these just in case, because once that's boiling, and if I'm getting my hand into a boiling thing, that's a lot, right? So I'll bring these and pluck things out of there. My freaking grandfather used to be able to pluck things out of boiling water. And I watched him, and it was just about speed and confidence. There's no this, right? My grandpa would just boom, got it. I couldn't believe it. It was crazy. So anyway, temperature, pH, temperature, pH, temperature, pH. Temperature, very important. Boiling, boiling. All our canning supplies are in here and they are boiling. Our lid is in there too. Not the best tongue.
You boiled the lid?
I'm even boiling the lid. I've got my jar, I've got my lid, everything that's gonna touch anything is gonna be boiling, right? I'm gonna pluck this. This is still hot from when this was boiling. I'm gonna get myself also clutch, right? Get yourself a nice funnel. And one of my favorite, what's that? Did the boil what? The funnel, no. That's a good point though. I know I never have though. I'm gonna get this everywhere.
Look at all that bacteria.
Yeah, I know, right? So pretty simple, right? We're filling. We want to make sure we're leaving ourselves some headspace like we talked about. Hold that up and show that without burning myself. Right about there is where we want to go. Then we want to take our hot, sterilized lid. We want to go right on with that. Another important tool, because that is hot right now. That's hot and we're not even boiling, okay? That's hot because it was boiling. We're gonna twist on, invert, very important. You see how far away this is? Far away. Once in a great while, these things will explode on you. It is very rare. I don't wanna scare you out of canning. I've probably had it happen. It happens to me once a year, but I also can thousands and thousands of bottles a year. So it probably happens once every couple thousand bottles, you could get an exploder. So this is why you want a towel and you want space. You want to give yourself, it could just be a little hairline fracture in the jar. Because I'm using my jars year after year after year. And this thing, once this gets used, gets thrown in a dishwasher, gets put in a basement, then I'm looking for Christmas ornaments at some point and I'm moving boxes around and when I move that box over here and you know what I'm saying? Just a little hairline fracture in this thing. And so, you know what's interesting? If you're really paying attention, you can hear it too. When you do that, you'll hear it go ting. You know what I'm saying? Like ting. And then you're like, oh shit. Okay, so anyway, so we want to definitely make sure we're away and we have a towel. Because what would happen? This is really our most dangerous maybe position we're ever going to be in. But what would happen if this did explode on us? We'd have some coverage. We got our towel. We're away from our body. My grandfather had a famous story about like one of his sisters, like, you know, was like tightening it like this, and I don't know if that was made up or not. That might have just been the type of stories they tell. I don't know if this is going to be hot enough to achieve a vacuum or not. It might still be hot enough, but it might not, since I killed the induction burners. By the way, does anyone know how much induction burners cost? Because I think I owe CountryMax some. This might pop, it might not. I'm not sure if it was still hot enough, but that's basically what we're looking for. I'm gonna bottle a bunch more and give them to you. If they don't pop, you just need to use them soon, because that would mean they're not shelf stable. Another thing, inversion, right? I actually didn't talk about inversion. So you probably do wanna do that to sterilize the bottom of the lid. But we sterilize the lid when we put it in here. We could have skipped that and just done the inversion. I'll tell you what the rules say about this. Inversion in commercial canning, for me, needs to be done for at least 2 full minutes. Now, my grandpa, I watched him for years and years do this and be done with inversion, right? That was how he sterilized the bottom of a lid. But the best I can get away with in commercial canning is 2 full minutes of that thing being upside down. I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't really know. I'm not a scientist and I don't know, but that's what they say. They say you need the 2 minutes. The one way you can avoid that is with a piece of machinery called a steam capper. A steam capper basically sterilizes the lid before it goes on. So steam capper is going to be this machine, again, very expensive machine. It turns out in manufacturing, none of the machines are cheap. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? So anyway, you can get this machine that basically will take the lid, sterilize it, heat it, put it to temp, and then down onto the bottle, immediately achieve a vacuum, and beautiful, right? Now you don't have to invert. Because of what we're doing, because we're just boiling water, there's nothing really too official about this. I'm gonna tell you to do both. Boil your lid, give it a little brief inversion. That way you're just kind of covered. And again, that's just about the fact that there's that bottom of that lid. Who knows where it's been? We don't know what it did last weekend, you know? It probably was out there causing trouble. So we want to do that. So anyway, any questions about this part? The actual physical bottling of canned goods? Anyway?
To boil the whole jar, shouldn't you be in?
Fully immersed, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in a perfect world, that jar was down in a big pot, probably a pot about this size. And honestly, I've got even a couple bigger pots, but probably a pot even just this size. And I would have had several jars going in there. And what I would be doing is kind of doing a rotation. So as I was doing, it is getting hot in case you guys are wondering. So basically what I would be doing is I have the perfect size pot at home too, where I've got this one that will, yeah, you see, I get a little gutsy with my inversions. I have this one that's perfect where it'll hold like 3 jars, so I get a rotation going where like I go clockwise. And so I always know to pluck this one, the one that's at, I guess that would be what, 8 o'clock, and then 12 o'clock and 4 o'clock, so that they're in there for a while, fully immersed. You're exactly right. And the cap should be fully immersed too.
So
Yeah.
if it doesn't pop, is it not safe?
It just means it's not shelf stable. That would be safe. If you take, you guys, I'm gonna give these, am I allowed to give them away? I'm gonna give them to you. Take them. If they don't pop, it just means it's not shelf stable. It just means put it in the fridge tonight. That's all. We'll know soon if these are gonna pop or not. Yeah, take them to you and take them, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just wouldn't be something that would be considered shelf stable. Use it, what is today? Maybe it's not, I don't even know what day, oh my God. What is going on with my life? I literally couldn't come up with the day of the week anymore. Yeah, I was gonna say, we're waiting for Sunday. I figured this out years ago. It turns out you don't have to wait till Sunday to have sauce.
How long do you boil the jars?
Just a couple of, they're in there for a couple of minutes. They're not in there for hours or anything like that. So you saw the speed at which I'm canning, and I was telling her I've got this one where I do a 3-jar rotation. So by the time I do 3 jars, yeah, they're not in there that long, a couple of minutes. Any other questions or anything? If in theory, if it was vacuumed, and Officially 2 years, unofficially probably a little bit longer, but I think you'd start to lose quality. When my grandfather passed away, I took the rest of his canned tomatoes, and I've been saving 2 from 2014. And I haven't opened them, so I don't know, but they still look good. Any other questions? What type of tomatoes I used? I used Roma tomatoes. Roma plum tomatoes, I think, to be honest with you, I kind of think those are the same thing. I think plum is like the family, right? Plum is like saying Smith, and then Roma is like saying John Smith, yeah.
And those tomatoes that are high-end from Italy, you can't get them in Rochester.
You can, you actually,
The actual,
okay, so fresh San Marzano tomatoes, truly imported fresh San Marzano tomatoes, I don't want to say you can't get them. I have not seen them. You can go to Wegmans and buy canned tomatoes that are true, honest to God San Marzanos, but they're already canned, right? So they're gonna have a seal on them, actually. So I might get my Grandpa Pete on here. They're gonna have a little seal on them, which maybe I'll pull up on my phone and show you. There's you have to watch out. So when you go, you're gonna see some stuff that says like San Marzano style tomatoes, or they'll just say San Marzano or San Marzano style, but there's this seal. See these 2 little circles up here? It's not important to like read the writing. That is authentic San Marzano. And that's not all that hard to find. There you go. Thank you very much for the assistance. That's not all that hard to find, but they're already canned. So if you're looking for true, honest to God, fresh San Marzano tomatoes, I've not seen them. I don't want to say it's impossible. I'm sure it's not impossible. I'm sure it's possible to get those. But they are great. They are really great. Oh yeah. So I just got a little splash on me. And again, these aren't quite as hot as they should be. They're not boiling. But long sleeves helps too. You're going to get a little splasheroo. I actually had I kind of failed on this, but the day that I made the batch of sauce that I ended up submitting that got approved for commercial use, I actually burned myself that day, exactly the way that you guys just saw, where something came up and bit me, and I had a scar for months. And that batch got approved from the day that I got, and I always thought to myself, I should have gotten that tattooed there, because I had that mark forever. And it was like, that was like a good mark.
When are you gonna start teaching your son how to do this?
Leo, he's already at work, man. My 3-year-old, my 3-year-old comes to the factory. We gotta edit this out of the video because OSHA might be watching. My 3-year-old comes to the factory, and I'll put him on the forklift and stuff and tell him, hurry up, get those pallets. No, I'm just kidding. He sits on my lap and I let him honk the horn. He thinks it's cute. It is very cute. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
The box you had earlier, the tomatoes?
Yeah.
About how many pounds is that?
Ooh, good question.
look like 25.
Is that, yeah.
25.
There were only 13 and a half pounds in there.
That's what was in there? And that wasn't full, though. It wasn't full, right? So I bet you're right. I bet you're about right with the 25, because that was it half full, maybe? Not even? Okay.
And then how many jars do you get out of that?
Well, to tell you the truth, well, first of all, these are quart jars right here, so these are 32 ounces. So these are kind of big. But to tell you the truth, those boiled down pretty intensely. I mean, this pot holding that many tomatoes, but that was hours and hours of me boiling those. So that was a while. How many jars would I get out of it? To tell you the truth, it's hard for me to say exactly.
Well, that's this, right?
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Yeah, again with the quarts, but we'll find out. I don't think the size of the container also isn't really a huge matter until you start talking about truly really little tiny containers. Then there's a little bit more finesse there, I think. How many people? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
What makes these mason jars so special?
They are very durable. They're strong, durable jars. What makes them so special? To tell you the truth, I don't know enough about the actual jars. I can tell you that the glass that we use to can tomato sauce is a little bit more reinforced. It's designed for hot fill. Mason jars are just durable. The jars that you were talking about earlier where you were saying, hey, can I take by the way, you named some pasta sauce brand. What brand did you name? Was it? think it was. She earlier she said if I have an old ragu jar, which apparently is a pasta sauce. I've never heard of it. I don't know. I googled it after. I'm just kidding. I googled it after you said it. Turns out it's a pasta sauce. I was just telling them they probably haven't heard of it either. But
It's easier to say.
yeah, right. So
The issue be the lids.
yeah.
You can't get lids for those, right? Because they're not standard lids like these.
So we're getting into particular. I mean, technically you can probably find lids for those online. I mean, I find lids for those, right? Those would be like my pasta sauce, there's like a 63 millimeter little lid, right? And that would work for thermal processing. I don't know, you stumped the instructor.
Can we reuse these lids also?
You actually cannot reuse these lids. You can reuse, do you remember at the one time I was talking about how I use these little twisties? Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I say the flat lid and then the ring? You can reuse those rings all day, but the actual flat lid, this thing, no. And these, I don't think this is gonna pop on us, so I'm still gonna let you guys take these, but we're gonna say they're not shelf stable. They didn't quite get hot enough. Okay, so that did tiny bit left in, but only about 2 gallons worth. Yeah, it boiled down bad. That's a lot. And I was talking about earlier that I would strain that maybe and even thicken that a bit. This is, do you see how loose this is?
How would you thicken it?
Okay, so 2 ways. One, before what we did, I could actually strain that out. I'd actually take that giant colander, get rid of water, and then put it back in, and now just have a thicker thing going on for myself. So I'm getting rid of water as I'm going. I might do that a couple times over the course of 4 hours. The other option is just can it this way, just like this. And then on the day you actually use it and cook it, if you're looking for something thicker, so if you're not making soup, say you're making sauce, tomato paste, a little bit of tomato paste. Yeah, a little tomato paste, do the trick. Any other questions? Anything? Yes.
I use the water bath, and so like that type of sauce, I would wait for the water to come to a boil and time out for 10 minutes. Just wait for.
You're saying at this point you would go back into a water bath?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that would be safer. You're holding it longer inside the container. Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're doing is you're just really solidifying sterilized product with that. Yep. I've been doing it this way for years. You've been doing it that way for years. That's probably a bit safer. This is, I'm still here. I don't know. It's working for me. But yeah, what you're doing would just be going the extra mile to have a more of a guarantee on safe product. Yeah. Yes.
Is there a difference between like the iodized salt that you were using and the pickling?
That's so funny you would ask that. I knew someone was going to ask that, and I was like, I need to Google the answer to this. I have no idea. Is there a difference between iodized salt and pickling salt? Does anyone in the room know the answer to that, by the way? I knew. You know what's so funny? I foresaw this moment. I literally had nightmares about this moment. I was like, somebody's going to ask me about the salt, and I'm not going to know the answer. And then I thought to myself, I thought, Paul, Google it, and then own it. Get up in front of that class, and then you're going to act like you know the answer, and then here I am, and I don't know. Yeah. Good degree. Piece of paper, 3-day class. Yes, sir.
Is the warning about it exploding only while it's upside down for the first 2 minutes?
No, I think it's honestly as soon as that hot liquid gets in there.
Explode down?
No, I think at this point, I think we're good. At this point, I think we're good. No, so it is pretty early on. So I think it's the introduction of the hot liquid to a jar that could have a hairline fracture that we didn't catch with our eye. Really, that's going to happen pretty quickly if that's going to happen. Yeah, I've never seen it happen at this point.
The answer is
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
I love it.
Can you use vintage jars?
What do you mean, just old, like super old jars?
My
or-
mother-in-law just gave me jars that were probably from like the 60s.
Yeah, some of my jars are my grandfather's that were, to be honest, I forgot to tell you guys, this is my great-grandmother's spoon. Yeah, that's been in the Guglielmo family forever. No, the jars that I use, I think some of them are really old. Yeah, so I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, which I guess goes to speak to why mason jars are so great. They kind of last forever, right? Like my jars that we do my sauce in, or why don't we use that other brand as an example? Like those jars. You know. yeah, the Zippo frame. Those are probably, you get a couple uses out of those, and I'm sure at some point something's gonna go wrong with those. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Talk about the jars, most dishwashers do have a sanitize setting on them also, and so it's kind of nice to put it through the regular wash cycle and then do the sanitize, and then as you can, so you take them right out of the hot dishwasher right immediately, then they're ready for the hot sauce.
Love it. I love it. So do you boil your jars, or do you go right from dishwasher? You put product, then product right in, and then you go to your water bath? I like it. Yeah, that's a good method. Sure. I've never heard of that.
I've seen it online.
Have you seen that's been done?
That way they can do like a dozen or more at once.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool idea. If she's seen it online. If it's online, it's true. So, yeah.
Doesn't mean that you should actually do it. Is there any foods that you should not?
Well, there's definitely more difficult things. When we get into those low acid things like we were talking about before, beans, things like that, you can. Obviously, you can go to the store and buy, so it's possible. I'm not saying here saying it's impossible. You have a lot more to worry about when you get into what's called a low acid. Remember when I talked about formulated acid, acidified, low acid? Low acid can get pretty scary, but it's doable. So for what we did just now, thermal processing, you need a lot of acid. Yeah, you need something acidic, and these are naturally acidic. So saying you need a lot of acid, the acid in this case, a lot of it came from the tomato itself, so it doesn't hurt anything. So when I say a lot of acid, it sounds scary, but in reality, we didn't add any citric acid to this.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying the food that you're doing, if it's a lower acid level, then you have to do pressure canning.
Yeah, if you get up into like low acid foods, yeah, if you're getting up into that kind of stuff. Or pickling, I don't know enough about pickling, but I think that would be another option there. I guess that would change maybe not, but
That's vinegar.
yeah, that would be, that's a different thing. Yeah, so the pressure canning probably would be the better option for low acid. Yeah. One other thing when you're testing, this just came up actually, I was thinking about, if you do end up buying a pH meter and you really want to test and you really want to be sure, and maybe you put some chunks and you don't know, if you have, let's say you did this and you have a bunch of chunks in there, like a good example would be if I wanted to make sauce and I wanted to have meatballs in there, and now I want to can the meatballs, okay? Harder to do, but I'm going to tell you how you can know for sure if you've done it right or not. So you're going to want acid. You're going to need a pH meter for this. I would never risk this without a pH meter. But you can pH during cooking. If you're safe, you're under 4.2, you're safe. You bottle it hot, very hot. Next day, 24 hours later, you're going to pH it again. However, we're going to do one major different thing. We want to take one jar. If we do 200 jars, we're going to take one jar. And we're going to blend it because we need to get the meat. We need to know the entire environment of that bottle, what the acid level is. So if I had this sauce that had chunks, if I had meatballs in it, I want to take that, put that in a blender, blend that up 24 hours later, and now I'm going to pH that, what I come up with the blending. And if I'm still under 4.2, then I can rest assured the rest of it was safe. That's getting a little scarier though, and you really, in that case, you're going to need acid, and you're going to need a pH meter, and you're going to need to do your 24-hour check in that case, because that could go wrong if you're not being very careful. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I think we did it. I think we did a canning class, right? All right, let me see my notes if there's anything I forgot to bring. Let me see here, hold on a second. Did I ever bring up pH? Did I bring that up? Temperature, pH meters, acidified for critical pastas. Yeah, no, I think we got it. I think we did it all. I think we did it. Thank you guys very much for coming. I appreciate it. Yeah.